The city of Kryvyi Rih also faced intense shelling this week. The Russians killed a 47-year-old woman, a mother of 2 children. Another 15 people were injured. Medical staff are currently fighting for the lives of 5 victims. In the morning, the enemy attacked the city with ballistic missiles. Once, missile landed near the hotel, while the second hit it directly. Moreover, the second strike, which is important, occurred just as rescuers have arrived. The Russians acted exactly like that, deliberately, treacherously, and cynically. TSN journalist Anastasia Nevernaya will tell us more about the consequences of the strike.
The partially destroyed hotel with the symbolic name Druzhba. The ground is covered with shards of glass and debris. In the morning, 2 ballistic missiles hit here. A video of the moment of impact has surfaced online. In addition to the hotel, around 30 surrounding apartment buildings were also hit. Several yards are covered in glass, and there are hardly any intact windows left. Victoria and her 2 daughters are recovering from the shock. The woman says she was just making breakfast for her youngest when the explosion went off.
I was saved by the open window. The girls were far from the balcony, so it blew out a bit. The youngest was really scared and cried.
Victoria didn't want to tempt fate a second time. I went to the shelter with the kids.
The second explosion. We didn't catch it because we went to the shelter as soon as my dad arrived and took us. I don't know, maybe they felt it. Last time there were also 2 explosions.
Lyudmila was just drinking coffee in the kitchen when the blast wave threw her into the next room.
I found myself in another room. That's how hard I was thrown. I hurt my hand a little here. The windows here and on that side are completely shattered. If they don't take care of it today, I'll just sleep here on the bench.
6 months ago, the occupiers already struck this hotel. Since then, there have been no residents here. But for most locals, these attacks have already hit their apartments for the second time. Alexander's father miraculously survived this time.
I had plywood after the first hit. It saved me. But if he had been sleeping, he would have been caught in it.
A woman died in the trolley bus that was passing by the site of the attack. She was an employee of the district military administration. She was just heading to work. Another injured person from that same trolley bus is being rescued in the hospital right now. In these shots, you can see the paramedics at work. A total of 15 people were injured. 9 of them were hospitalized, 5 in serious condition.
Explosive injuries? Explosive injuries, shrapnel wounds, gunshot wounds to the torso, limbs, abdomen, and head.
This hotel has become the 4th in Kryvyi Rih that the occupiers have targeted since the beginning of the full-scale invasion.
And now about a topic that shook the information space this week. The US has suspended military aid to Ukraine and intelligence sharing. After a few days, everything returned to normal. The Kremlin terrorists celebrated too soon. But we still decided to figure out how critically important Washington's military aid is for the Ukrainian armed forces. That's exactly what our next piece is about.
Short, dynamic music, calm music.
This is a long-range self-propelled howitzer, M109. The American artillery system is very demanding, but at the same time, it works excellently, assure the Ukrainian soldiers. Almost every 155mm shell hits the target almost perfectly. At the moment, in one of the hottest areas near Chasov Yar, this self-propelled howitzer is firing almost around the clock. But soon, due to a shortage of shells, the situation may change.
Due to artillery, the use of barrel artillery and multiple launch rocket systems is eliminated. Up to 80% of enemy ground targets. They are very important and necessary.
If there aren't enough shells, they will have to be sourced literally from all over the world. 155mm caliber, 150-ton shells are being sought in countries of the former Warsaw Pact or in Asian or African states friendly to the former USSR. That's right, over 1.5 million ammunition rounds have already arrived in Ukraine as part of the Czech initiative. These supplies will continue at least until April. In case of restrictions or shortages in shell supplies, Ukraine can partially replace them with drones. And we already have such experience.
We did that a year ago when we found ourselves without American aid. In 2024, when the enemy was advancing quite intensively in the east, Ukraine has used a large number of drones, slowing down the enemy's advance.
Almost all the aid has been approved by President Biden's administration. And this is the weaponry worth $9 billion that Ukraine has already received. And with that, the aid stopped after the new Trump administration's decision to halt all weapon supplies and intelligence sharing. Kyiv has practically found itself alone against an armed and brutal enemy. Now Ukraine will have to quickly look for alternatives.
The situation is complicated. It requires us to switch to the resources of our allies. Not like the way Americans see themselves at this time, their administration and reliance on their own strength. So we have powerful world-class production of electronic warfare stations, but all of this requires time, resources, and so on.
It's very difficult. In Ukraine, there will be a lack of intelligence data, as American satellites provide, among other things, the ability to gather information on the movements of Russians, their logistics, detect headquarters, and the concentration of equipment to strike it. And although Britain and France are ready to share information, their systems and reconnaissance planes don't venture that far to the front line. Moreover, Ukraine is deprived of the ability to respond in time to the takeoffs of strategic bombers and missile launches. And this will affect the civilian population and infrastructure.
A couple of days ago, the French deployed an unmanned strategic reconnaissance aircraft over the Black Sea. This is in neutral waters, so this is just an example of how the French and our other allies are trying to help. But of course, we don't have the same capabilities in space, for example, as we do in the air.
According to the expert, Ukraine is capable of partially replacing American weaponry, especially when it comes to artillery shells or American tanks. However, experts emphasize that among the aid from the US that is being actively used on the battlefield, there is a unique component that is practically irreplaceable. First of all, this concerns long-range weapons, guided aerial bombs, cluster munitions, and missiles for highly mobile multiple launch rocket systems, HIMARS.
They operated along the front line and allowed, among other things, to strike at a certain depth into the enemy's defensive positions, hitting their warehouses and concentrations of personnel, as well as command posts. HIMARS can be replaced with drones, and we can increase the supply of long-range artillery. Even if it's not up to 80 kilometers, at least we can manage 25 to 35 kilometers, and so on.
But the biggest problem for Ukraine is the air defense umbrella. Right now, American Patriot systems are protecting the Ukrainian sky. Missiles and systems are produced only by the US. And it's practically impossible to replace them, even if we manage to purchase European analogs which are not as long range as the Patriots.
SAMP, for example, has a shorter range, but these are more modern surface-to-air missile systems than the Patriots. France and Italy have some, but they are considering issues related to their own security.
USC Special Representative for Ukraine, Kurt Kellogg, stated that the weapons already provided to Ukraine are enough to last until summer. What will happen next is currently unknown. However, according to the expert, the halt in supplies has a reverse effect, where the pause can impact the revenues of American companies that produce weapons.
American companies, they are counting on it. If you are told that you have produced such and such a quantity, you have invested money, but at the same time you do not receive any profit and you cannot sell it. Of course, that's not in the interest of any company.
Apart from Ukraine, there are no other countries willing to buy weapons in the quantities that large US corporations produce. So the potential revolt among manufacturers within the United States could very well play into our hands. And the pause in US aid to Ukraine may not last long.
"60 complex fractures. The most seriously wounded after the enemy strike on Dobropoli, which is in the Pokrovsk district, are currently being rescued in the city of Dnipro. After the attack on the city in the Donetsk region, 11 people were brought to the neighboring region. Doctors have already performed dozens of surgeries. The condition of 4 of the wounded is very serious. KTSN correspondent Olga Pavlovskaya will tell us more in her chilling report.
A mother won't let go of her son's hand in the intensive care unit. 28-year-old Nikolai has finally come to his senses after the terrible strike.
He's the best. He's my sunshine.
And she didn't know yet. I didn't even know that today was not March 8th.
Yes, he congratulated me on March 8th today.
He was at a friend's house when the Russians launched the first strike. A humanitarian mission worker immediately rushed to save the victims. He knew there was a woman in the destroyed house who couldn't get out on her own.
She was just less mobile and couldn't run. I was helping her across the avenue when the second explosion of a cluster munition happened. It sounds like fireworks, but it's really bad.
It was a combined attack by the Russians on Dobropoli. March 7. After the first strike, the occupiers hit again at the people who were trying to escape and help. 11 people have died and around 50 more are injured.
We preliminarily understand that the enemy struck the city with missiles, Iskander-M, Tornado-S, and also launched the UAV Garan-2. Residential buildings came under fire from the enemy army.
Severely wounded Nikolai was brought to Dnipro unconscious and with massive blood loss. The doctors operated on him all weekend to save his life. The diaphragm is torn.
The diaphragm is torn, there are bruised lungs, a kidney is damaged, and unfortunately a fragment is lodged in the spine. Tears are flowing. From his eyes you can tell he wants to walk.
But what was the first thing you asked about? He asked as soon as he came to whether they had saved the elderly woman he was helping during the attack.
I called myself. The woman is alive, she's elderly, and with crutches. She received help.
11 of the most severely injured were brought to Dnipro. 3 of them are still in life-threatening condition.
We counted a total of 60 severe fractures among all of them. There is a woman in extremely critical condition, her entire intestine is shattered, she is 64 years old. There is also a 33-year-old woman completely battered by debris who is on a ventilator.
Today alone, more than 10 surgeries are scheduled for the wounded from Dobropoli. Among them is Nikolai, so that he can get back on his feet.
Everything will be all right. Thank you.
He is just waiting for his fiancée, with whom he was saving civilians from hotspots as part of a humanitarian mission. But he admits the wedding will have to be postponed for now.
Here you are. I need to recover, help people, and only then celebrate the wedding. The dream is for the war to end as soon as possible, so that one can plan their life.
After recovering, he hopes that Nikolai will still be able to be useful and will save those in need again.